What happened outside Riverbend Medical Center that Tuesday afternoon would cost one police officer his badge, spark national outrage, and end in a staggering $10.3 million lawsuit. But in the moment it started, all Danielle Brooks could see was the concrete rushing toward her face as she was violently pulled from the wheelchair she depended on to live. The command came sharp and sudden. "Stand up now, or I'll make you." Danielle's fingers tightened around the armrests of her chair, her heart beginning to pound with the kind of dread that comes when you realize someone in power has already decided not to believe you. "Officer, I can't stand," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I'm paralyzed." But Officer Travis Cole wasn't listening. 6 minutes earlier, the late afternoon outside Riverbend Medical Center in Houston had been moving with its usual controlled chaos. Nurses rotating shifts, families coming and going, rideshare vehicles pulling into the pickup lane. Danielle, 29 years old, sat near the front entrance in her motorized wheelchair, exactly where she sat every Tuesday after her spinal injury checkups. A former National Guard medic, Danielle had lost the use of her legs 3 years earlier after a devastating training accident left her with permanent nerve damage below the waist. Since then, the wheelchair had become her constant companion, as ordinary to her as breathing, though the world still often treated it like an inconvenience. That afternoon she wore a gray hoodie against the mild breeze, black athletic pants draped neatly over legs she could no longer feel, and the bright hospital wristband still circled her left wrist. Her phone rested in her hand as she texted her rideshare driver, who had replied he was about 12 minutes away. Danielle leaned back slightly, watching the steady flow of people outside the hospital, not knowing her quiet routine was seconds from collapsing into chaos. About 30 feet away, near a row of benches, a man in dark clothing suddenly lunged toward a woman and ripped her purse free in one violent motion. The woman screamed, the sound cutting through the air like glass. Danielle reacted instantly, her medic instincts still sharp. She hit 911 before most people had even stood up. "911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. Danielle spoke clearly and quickly, describing the suspect. Male, dark hoodie, heading toward the east parking structure. But the situation twisted in a way no one expected. The fleeing robber glanced back, saw Danielle on the phone in her wheelchair, and realized she was the one reporting him. In a flash decision, he doubled back. Danielle barely had time to register what was happening before the man rushed her, snatched the phone from her hand, and ripped her bag from her lap. "Hey, stop," she shouted, but the thief was already sprinting away between parked cars, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Danielle sat frozen for a moment, breathing hard, her hands suddenly empty. Around her, the earlier victim was crying while bystanders murmured in shock, but no one chased the suspect, and Danielle couldn't. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself, knowing police were already on the way because of her interrupted call. What she didn't know was that the incomplete dispatch description was about to turn her from victim into suspect. Officer Travis Cole pulled into the hospital lot exactly 6 minutes later. 31 years old with 6 years on the force, Cole had built a reputation that sat quietly in his personnel file. Several prior complaints alleging aggressive conduct and questionable judgment, none sustained. When the robbery call came over the radio, the only detail that seemed to stick in his mind was simple and dangerously vague: black suspect in a hoodie. As Cole stepped out of his cruiser and scanned the hospital frontage, his eyes landed almost immediately on Danielle sitting alone in her gray hoodie. He didn't approach the crying woman on the bench. He didn't ask the growing cluster of witnesses what had happened. He walked straight toward Danielle with the confidence of someone who believed the situation was already solved. Danielle saw him coming and felt a flicker of relief. Finally, help. That relief lasted less than 3 seconds. Cole stopped directly in front of her wheelchair, his posture stiff, his tone already edged with suspicion. "Ma'am, you match the description of a robbery suspect. You need to stand up right now." Danielle blinked in disbelief. "What? Officer, no. I'm the one who called," he cut her off sharply. "Stand up. Now." A cold knot formed in Danielle's stomach. "I can't stand," she said carefully. "I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I just came from an appointment inside." She lifted her wrist slightly, the hospital band visible. Cole's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "I'm not playing games," he said. "Stand up." Nearby, A woman who had witnessed the robbery stepped forward, her voice shaky but firm. "Officer, she's telling the truth. She was on the phone with 911. She's in a wheelchair." Another bystander added. "The guy who ran off robbed her too." But Cole raised a hand without even looking at them. "Stay out of this." Danielle could feel the situation slipping in a direction she couldn't control. "Please," she said, her voice tightening despite her effort to stay calm. "You can check inside. I'm a patient here. I cannot walk." Cole leaned closer, his voice dropping into something colder. "Last warning. Stand up." Danielle's pulse thundered in her ears. "Officer, I physically cannot." What happened next would be replayed millions of times before the week was over. Cole suddenly reached forward, grabbed Danielle by the arm, and yanked hard. Her upper body lurched forward while her legs remained motionless, dead weight beneath her. The wheelchair tipped sideways as Danielle was violently pulled free, her body crashing onto the concrete in front of a growing crowd of horrified witnesses already raising their phones. And in that instant, before the sirens, before the investigation, before the lawsuit that would shake the department, the only thing Danielle Brooks could think as pain shot through her back was one chilling realization. The officer standing over her had never believed her from the very beginning. The moment Danielle Brooks hit the pavement, the air outside Riverbend Medical Center seemed to snap tight with shock. The dull thud of her body against the concrete followed instantly by a chorus of gasps and shouted protests from the growing crowd. "She told you she's paralyzed," someone yelled, while another voice cut through sharply. "You just pulled her out of her wheelchair." Danielle lay on her side, breath knocked halfway out of her lungs. Her lower body twisted at an angle she couldn't feel, but knew wasn't right. Pain flared along her spine, not the sharp electric pain of sensation in her legs, but the deep, sickening ache in her lower back where the old injury never truly stopped hurting. Before she could fully process what had happened, Officer Travis Cole was already moving, flipping her onto her stomach and pulling her arms behind her back. "Stop resisting," he barked. Danielle's voice cracked with disbelief. "I'm not resisting. I can't move." The metal cuffs snapped tight around her wrists anyway. Around them, phones were now fully raised, cameras locked in. A woman near the benches was openly crying. "This is wrong. She told you she can't walk." Another bystander shouted. The real robber ran toward the garage. "What are you doing?" But Cole kept his focus fixed forward, jaw tight, breathing controlled in the way officers are trained to do when they believe they're in command of a situation. Inside Danielle's chest, though, panic was beginning to bloom. She had seen chaotic scenes before during her medic days, but never from the ground, never this powerless. "Officer," she said again, forcing each word through controlled breaths, "I am a patient here. Please check inside. I just came from physical therapy." For the first time, Cole hesitated, not enough to stop, but enough that the tension around them thickened. Then the distant wail of approaching sirens grew louder. "Back up." Less than 2 minutes later, a second patrol unit rolled into the pickup lane, and Sergeant Luis Ramirez stepped out, already scanning the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had worked too many volatile calls to trust first impressions. What he saw immediately didn't sit right. Tipped wheelchair, handcuffed woman on the ground, and a crowd that looked far more angry than relieved. Ramirez walked forward quickly. "What's going on, Cole?" Cole straightened slightly. "Robbery suspect. Matches dispatch description. Refused commands." From the pavement, Danielle lifted her head as much as the cuffs allowed. Her voice was strained but steady. "Sergeant, I'm paralyzed. I called 911. I was robbed too." Ramirez's eyes moved, first to her motionless legs, then to the wheelchair lying on its side, then to the bright hospital wristband still visible on her arm. His expression tightened just slightly. "Anyone here see what happened?" he called out. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Yes." The woman who had been robbed stepped forward first, still clutching her empty purse strap. "That's not the suspect. She called the police for me. The man who robbed us ran that way." She pointed toward the east parking structure. An older man holding his phone up added, "I recorded the whole thing. She never moved from that chair." Another voice chimed in, sharper with anger. "Your officer never asked a single question. He just grabbed her." Ramirez's jaw flexed once. He crouched beside Danielle, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, can you confirm you're unable to stand?" Danielle let out a slow breath. "Yes, sir. Complete paralysis below the waist." My records are inside. Physical therapy appointment at 3:30. Ramirez stood immediately. His tone when he spoke again had changed, not loud, but edged with command. Cole, did you verify her medical claim? Cole shifted slightly. She fit the description, Sarge. Black female, hoodie. Ramirez cut him off. That wasn't my question. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty flickered across Cole's face. It lasted barely a second, but it was there. Ramirez turned toward the hospital doors. Stay here. Do not move her. He moved quickly inside, badge already in hand. Outside, the crowd continued murmuring, phones still recording. Danielle lay still on the pavement, wrists aching inside the cuffs, fighting to keep her breathing steady. The humiliation was beginning to sink in now. Heavy, suffocating. Just minutes ago she had been waiting for a ride. Now she was face down on hospital concrete in handcuffs. Inside Riverbend Medical Center, Ramirez reached the front desk within seconds. I need to verify a patient, he said, flashing his badge. Danielle Brooks. The nurse typed quickly, eyes scanning the screen, and then her expression shifted. Yes, she was here this afternoon. Spinal injury patient. Permanent lower body paralysis. Ramirez exhaled slowly through his nose. That was all he needed. He turned and headed back outside at a brisk pace. When he emerged through the automatic doors, Cole looked up expectantly, but whatever he saw on Ramirez's face made his shoulders stiffen. Ramirez walked straight up to him. His voice was low but carried unmistakable authority. Uncuff her. Right now. Cole blinked. Sarge. Ramirez's tone hardened like steel. That is a direct order. The weight of the moment finally landed. Slowly, under the watchful lenses of at least a dozen phones, Officer Travis Cole crouched down and reached for his keys. The cuffs clicked open. Danielle pulled her arms forward carefully, wincing as circulation rushed back into her hands. Ramirez immediately stepped in, his voice quieter now. Ms. Brooks, I'm very sorry. We're going to get you back into your chair. But even as he said it, both of them knew something important had already broken, and it wasn't just the moment. Around them, the crowd kept recording, and the videos were already beginning their journey across the internet. By the time Danielle Brooks was carefully lifted back into her wheelchair outside Riverbend Medical Center, the damage was already far beyond the scrapes on her wrists or the deep ache radiating through her lower spine, because what had just happened was now living on at least 14 different smartphones, and within hours, the entire country would be watching. As Sergeant Luis Ramirez steadied the chair and asked if she needed medical attention, Danielle sat very still for a moment, her hands trembling slightly in her lap, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. Yes, she said quietly. I think I should be checked. EMS was called immediately, and as the medics began examining her, Officer Travis Cole stood several feet away, unusually silent now, his earlier certainty completely gone. The crowd hadn't dispersed. If anything, more people had gathered, some openly shaking their heads, others still recording. One man muttered loud enough to carry. This is exactly why nobody trusts y'all. Ramirez was already moving into damage control mode, taking witness names, securing statements, and, most importantly, requesting Cole's body cam footage be flagged and preserved. He knew what this looked like. More importantly, he knew what it was. Inside the hospital, doctors confirmed Danielle had suffered significant soft tissue trauma to her lower back along with bruising and nerve inflammation in her wrist from the cuffs. No new spinal damage, but the pain, they warned, could linger for weeks. Danielle listened quietly, her expression controlled but her eyes distant, the weight of what had happened settling deeper with every passing minute. By that evening, the first video hit social media. The caption was blunt. Houston officer drags paralyzed woman from wheelchair. Within 3 hours, it had crossed 1 million views. By midnight, it was everywhere. The clip was impossible to misunderstand. Danielle's calm voice sang, "I'm paralyzed." The officer's repeated command to stand, and then the violent pull that sent her crashing to the ground. Public reaction was immediate and explosive. By the next morning, the Houston Police Department released a brief statement calling the incident under review, but the damage to public perception was already done. Internal affairs moved fast, largely because the evidence was overwhelming. Cole's own body cam told the same story that bystander videos did. Danielle repeatedly identifying herself as paralyzed, witnesses backing her up, and Cole proceeding anyway. When investigators pulled Cole's personnel file, the situation worsened. 3 prior complaints alleging aggressive conduct. One specifically mentioning failure to properly assess a suspect before using force. None had resulted in serious discipline. That pattern now looked damning. Danielle, meanwhile, had already made her decision. 48 hours after the incident, she retained civil rights attorney Marcus Hill, who reportedly told her after reviewing the footage, "This is one of the clearest excessive force cases I've seen in years." The federal lawsuit was filed the following week. The allegations were extensive: excessive force, unlawful detention, disability discrimination, violation of civil rights, and failure to accommodate a clearly disabled individual. As media coverage intensified, the department placed Cole on administrative leave, but the pressure kept building. Community leaders demanded answers. Disability rights groups issued formal statements. Veterans organizations publicly backed Danielle, noting her National Guard service and medical history. 3 weeks after the incident, the department made its move. Officer Travis Cole was terminated. The official findings cited multiple policy violations, including improper use of force and failure to conduct basic situational verification. But the legal battle was just beginning. City attorneys quickly realized the case was nearly impossible to defend in front of a jury. The visuals alone were devastating. The body cam audio was worse. After months of negotiations behind closed doors, the city made a decision designed to stop the bleeding. The settlement was announced on a Thursday morning. $10.3 million paid to Danielle Brooks, one of the largest disability-related excessive force settlements in Texas history. At the press conference that followed, Danielle appeared composed but firm, her wheelchair positioned front and center as cameras flashed. "This was never just about me," she said steadily. "This is about what happens when people in authority stop listening and start assuming." The case didn't just cost millions, it forced changes. The Houston Police Department implemented mandatory disability recognition training, updated its suspect verification protocols, and expanded early warning reviews for officers with prior complaints. As for Travis Cole, he quietly disappeared from law enforcement, his name permanently tied to the viral footage that continued circulating in training seminars and civil rights presentations across the country. Months later, Danielle used part of her settlement to launch the Brooks Mobility Justice Foundation, focused on legal support for disabled victims of misconduct. But the moment people remembered most, the moment that never stopped replaying online, was still that single, devastating sequence outside Riverbend Medical Center. A calm woman in a wheelchair saying she couldn't stand, and the officer who chose not to believe her.